6. Wind factor. The strong moving current of air is called wind. It is an important ecological factor of the atmosphere affecting variously the plant life on flat plains, along sea coasts and at high altitudes in mountains. Wind is directly involved in transpiration, in causing several types of mechanical damage and in dissemination of pollen, seeds and fruits. Wind also modifies the water relations and light conditions of a particular area. The movement or velocity of wind is affected by such factors such as temperature, atmospheric pressure, geographical features, including topography, vegetation masses and position with respect to seashores. Air moves from a region of high pressure to low pressure. The pressure differences are mainly due to differential heating of atmosphere. The equatorial regions receive more heat than north or south regions, thus, low pressure occurs at lower latitude. The air generally moves from poles towards equator. Winds result in various physical, anatomical, and physiological effects on plants. 1. Physical effects such as breakage and uprooting, deformation, lodging or flattening of herbaceous plants. Such strong prevailing winds can leave trees permanently bent, as wheat, maize, sugar, cane, etc., abrasion of buds of plants by wind-carried soil particles, erosion and deposition of soil around plant roots, plant injury due to salt spray along sea coasts. 2. Anatomical and physiological effects such as formation of dense, reddish xylem called compression wood on the compressed side of wind deformation, desiccation due to increased rates of evaporation and transpiration which are caused by strong winds and dwarfing of trees on sea coasts, Arctic or alpine timberline due to prolonged dehydration and consequent loss of turgidity under the influence of drying winds. 7. Physiographic factors. Climate at any point on the globe depends upon the combined effects of 3 factors: the amount of solar heat, solar radiation, atmospheric circulation and physiographic factors. Physiographic factors are those which are introduced by the structure, conformity and behavior of the Earth's surface, by topographic or orographic features, such as elevation and slopes, by geodynamic processes such as silting and erosion and consequently by local geology. Mountains, hills, hillocks, valleys, etc., result from irregularities in Earth's surface. These distinct topographic reliefs tend to produce marked local climate or microclimates. For example, in respect to the microclimate I due to as the summits are different I forest onjf from the sides of mountains I oris fo p and narrow valleys t 70 or d. Ferrant. Following headings. 1. Latitudes and altitudes. Latitude represents distance from the equator. Temperature values are maximum at the equator, decreasing gradually towards poles. Marked variations in temperature at different latitudes result in the division of Earth's vegetation into different zones, such as equatorial, tropical rainforests, desert or snow grasslands, deciduous forests, coniferous forests, 14.500 feet alpine forests, tundra, ice and snow of poles. Figure 4.3. 12,000 inches. Lower to the temperate zone, the sunlight falls nearly at an angle of 90 degrees Celsius, making the climate warm and dry. These places are known as tropical regions and lie on either side of the equator. Temperature and rainfall are commonly said to determine the type of vegetation at different altitudes of mountain. In addition to these 2 factors, edaphic conditions, soil characteristics, are also found important. At higher altitudes, generally temperature decreases and rainfall increases, and these certainly affect the development of soil and vegetation. Due to low temperature and high rainfall, the organic matter content of the soil increases at high altitudes, resulting in increase in soil nitrogen and a decrease in soil's pH value. As a result, xerophytes are more common at lower altitudes and camophytes occur at higher altitudes. Moreover, at sea level, the atmospheric pressure is 760 mm Hg. The partial pressure of oxygen remains approximately 1/5, i.e., about 160 mm Hg, of the atmospheric pressure. With increasing altitudes, the atmospheric pressure and partial pressure of O goes on decreasing. Since oxygen is thinner at higher altitudes, it becomes a stress factor for many animals, including mammals. Lastly, in Himalayan mountains, temperature variations are quite evident, and there is a general zonation of vegetation from lower to higher altitudes. The successive zones of vegetation from base upwards are tropical and subtropical, temperate and alpine. But there are practically no sharp boundaries between these vegetational zones due to differences in topography, soil and geology. Thus, after studying the vegetational zones at different altitudes on Himalayas, western as well as eastern, the effect of temperature together with altitude and other factors becomes quite apparent. Figure 4.5. 2. Height of mountain chains. Effect of different heights, altitude, can be better seen on mountains. With an increase in altitude above sea level, there are changes in values of temperature, pressure, wind velocity, humidity, intensity of solar radiation, etc. Due to these changes, vegetation at different altitudes differ much. 3. Direction of mountains and valleys. The directions of mountain chains or ranges in high mountains act as wind barriers and affect the climate. Mountains also steer or deflect winds into different directions and capture moisture from wind on certain sides to cause precipitation. Thus, moisture-bearing winds may not be able to cross a mountain range and may discharge rain near it. The far side of the mountain may not get much rain and develop into an arid zone, having xeric conditions. For example, the Himalayas act as great barriers for moisture-bearing sea winds. Therefore, the ocean side of the land in the northeastern region and the Gangetic Delta get good rains and have luxuriant vegetation, while the middle and inner Himalayas are dry with poor vegetation. The absence of a high land masses may be one of the reasons for the development of desert conditions in Rajasthan. Similarly, southern side of Kulu Valley, in Himachal, is moist with rich vegetation, whereas at lower level into Lahul Valley, there is very poor vegetation. High mountains not only act as climatic barriers to air masses between neighboring areas or zones but also cause local air circulation, giving rise to mountain winds. The most common winds in such areas are slope winds which blow downhill during night and uphill during the day. Such winds are frequent in Antarctica. Further, the relative humidity, i.e., dryness, humidity or severity, of a climate depends on whether the air comes from the north or the south, from the sea, or deserts, mountains or forests and so on. The heating of Earth's surface is directly proportional to the angle at which solar rays arrive on the ground. The closer their incidence to perpendicular, the more solar heat is delivered per square centimeter. Hence, mountain ranges affect the climate through rainfall and other factors which have a significant effect on the growth of vegetation and the distribution of animals. 4. Steepness of slope. Slope is the characteristic feature of mountains. The steepness of a slope has a distinct effect on the climate of the area, i.e., incidence of solar radiation, rainfall, wind velocity and the temperature of the region. Generally, southern and western slopes of mountain display higher temperature than do the northern or eastern slopes. Most probably these differences arise due to different solar radiation received, differences in the amount of rainfall, snowfall, relative humidity and wind movement on the two slopes. In India, all south-facing slopes are in general exposed to more solar radiation than north-facing slopes. North-facing slopes are generally cooler than south-facing ones. This is due to the fact that the steep southern slopes receive the rays of the midday sun almost at right angles, whereas the northern slopes receive only oblique rays during morning and evening hours and sometimes none at all except for a short period during summer, i.e., the duration of sunlight on the south-facing slope is longest. East and west-facing slopes receive equal amounts of sunlight, but in the former, the angle of incidence of the sun's rays is greatest in the morning hours when the air is cool and the dew has not fully disappeared. In west-facing slopes, on the other hand, the sun's rays become scorching as the air ice already heated up, causing a desiccation effect on the environment. The differences in solar radiation and consequent temperature values bring about changes in the vegetation on the slopes. For example, northern slope, which is protected from sun, support virgin forests with hygrophilous ground vegetation, whereas the southern slopes, which is heated by sun, have only a xerophytic vegetation. Various climatic factors of the slopes also affect the distribution of consumers' animals. Steepness of slope decides the rapidity with which water flows away from the surface and determines the characteristic of the soil. Thus, loss of water as runoff is more with increase in steepness of the slope. This is why having same amount of rainfall bear different types of vegetations. On a steep slope, plants are unable to establish, even if there is sufficient rainfall. Any little vegetation occurring there will be xerophytic in nature. Soil erosion is more prevalent on steep slopes. The water moving over the slopes causes erosion of the topsoil and consequent disappearance of vegetation from the areas. Eroded hills, steep slopes and rock may produce a special habitat where only particular species of plants can adapt themselves. Gravel, sand or clay eroded by water, wind, etc., from rock surfaces, are generally brought down by rivers and streams and these are ultimately deposited as silt at their mouths, providing new habitat e.g., salt marshes which may support different kinds of plants. The areas subjected to quick and continuous erosion are completely devoid of vegetation. Exposure of slope. A slope often remains exposed to sun and wind and this affects greatly the kind of plants growing there. Generally, the slope exposed to the sun and wind supports vegetation which may be entirely different from that which is less or not at all, exposed to sun and or wind. Visualizing this fact, greenhouses and hotbeds in temperate climates are always built in a way so as to face the sun or on southern slopes, which receive much heat from the sun. RUAYRYO 018. All organisms are interdependent on each other. Biotic environmental factors. Our organisms do not exist alone in nature but in a matrix of other organisms of many species. Many species in an area will be unaffected by the presence or absence of one another, this is often termed neutralism, but in some cases two or more species will interact. The evidence for such interaction is quite direct. Populations of one species are different in the absence and in the presence of a second species. Interspecific interactions. The interactions between species may have positive or negative results. Following 6 general types of interactions have been described. A. Positive interactions. 1. Mutualism. 2. Commensalism. 3. Protocooperation. B. Negative interactions. 4. Exploitation. I. Social parasitism. E. Parasitism. E. Predation. 5. Amensalism and antibiosis. 6. Competition. A. Positive interactions. In case of positive interactions, populations help one another and either one or both the species are benefited. This benefit may be regarding the food, shelter, substratum or transport. Further, such an association may be continuous or transitory, obligate or facultative and the two partners may be in close contact, i.e., their tissues remain intermixed with each other, or one of them may live within a specific area of the other or attached to its surface. Moreover, for the positive interactions, how does one determine that what is the benefit to the species? Individuals that participate in the interaction should have a higher relative fitness than those that do not participate. At the population level, the growth rate of a population containing mutualistic individuals should be higher than that of a population lacking such individuals. Busha et al., 1982. Positive interactions may be of the following types. I. Mutualism. Mutualism is an obligatory positive interspecific interaction that is strongly beneficial to both species. In past, it was termed symbiosis, c-1993. Such mutually beneficial interactions are more common in the tropics than elsewhere. In this case, both of the species derive benefit and there exists a close and often permanent and obligatory contact which is more or less essential for survival of each. In mutualism, two populations enter into some sort of physiological exchange and resulted in coevolution of both species, see Krebs, 1985. Some common examples of mutualistic association are the following. 1. Pollination by animals. Certain insects such as bees, moths, butterflies, etc., and birds derive food from the nectar, pollen or other plant products, and in return bring about cross-pollination, Fig. 5.1a. To ensure the success of this function, various structural adaptations have occurred in both plants and animals, leading to coevolution. 2. Dispersal of fruits and seeds. Birds and mammals are of great importance as agents of plant distribution. Seeds, fruits, even entire plants become attached to feathers or fur or ingested seeds are eaten and eliminated unharmed with the feces. 3. Mutual defense in ants and acacias. A mutualistic system of defense has been achieved by the swollen thorn acacias and their ant inhabitants in the New World tropics. The ants, Pseudomyrmex sp. depend on acacia sp. tree for food and a place to live, and the acacia depends on the ants for protection from herbivores and neighboring plants. Janssen, 1966. Swollen thorn acacias, e.g., Acacia cornigera, have large, hollow thorns in which ants live. Figure 5.2. The ants feed on modified leaflet tips, called Beltian bodies, which are the primary source of protein and oil for the ants, and also on enlarged nectaries, which supply sugars. Swollen thorn. 3. Mutual defense in ants and acacias. A mutualistic system of defense has been achieved by the swollen thorn acacias and their ant inhabitants in the New World tropics. The ants, Pseudomyrmex sp. depend on acacia sp. tree for food and a place to live, and the acacia depends on the ants for protection from herbivores and neighboring plants. Janssen, 1966. Swollen thorn acacias, e.g., Acacia cornigera, have large, hollow thorns in which ants live. Figure 5.2. The ants feed on modified leaflet tips, called Beltian bodies, which are the primary source of protein and oil for the ants, and also on enlarged nectaries, which supply sugars. Swollen thorn. Acacias maintain year-round leaf production, even in the dry season. Beltian bodies. To provide food for the ants. The acacia ants continually patrol the leaves and branches of the tree and immediately attack any herbivore that attempts to eat acacia leaves or bark. The ants also bite and sting any foreign vegetation that touches an acacia, and they clear all the vegetation from the ground beneath the acacia tree. Some of the species of ants that inhibit acacia thorns are obligate acacia ants and live nowhere else. 4. Lichens. They form the examples of mutualism where contact is close and permanent as well as obligatory. The body of lichens is made up of a matrix formed by a fungus, within the cells of which an alga is embedded. Figure 5.1b. The fungus makes available the moisture and minerals to the algae, which prepare food by photosynthesis. In nature, neither of the two can grow alone independently. Lichens tend to grow abundantly on bare rock surfaces. 5. Symbiotic nitrogen fixation. Here a bacterium rhizobium forms nodules in the roots of leguminous plants and lives symbiotically with the host. Figure 5.1c. Bacteria get a protective space to live in and derive prepared food from the roots of higher plants and in return fix gaseous nitrogen, making it available to the plants. The leguminous plants use this nitrogen in the protein synthesis, and so legumes are rich in proteins. Nitrogen fixation-like association also occurs in root nodules of Alnus, Alopecuris, Casuarina, Psychotices, Myrica, Podocarpus, etc., and leaves of about 400 species of non-leguminous plants. Mushroom. Fruiting body. 6. Mycorrhizae. In mycorrhizal. Pipe closing curly bracket. Closing square bracket. Associations. Tree roots become infested with fungal hyphae. Figure 5.1d. The fungi N derive their food from the tree roots and NOL at ls_g. Return their hyphae supply water and _ li, l, g, t, e. Minerals that they absorb from the soil EPL-1b, much like the root hairs of trees. It is believed OLB, T, O_ R that the fungus also regulates the pH and IL. IA2 mycorrhizae sugar level for a good growth of roots in acidic soils, e.g., conifers. Mycorrhizae may be on the surface of roots, ectotrophic, or inside between the cells of the roots, endotrophic. Ectotrophic mycorrhizae are common in nature on pines, oaks, hickories and beech, and endotrophic ones occur in red fungal hyphae maple and are common in roots and other tissues of many orchids and members of Ericaceae. The other similar root associations are met with actinomycetes, actinorhizal, in form of nodules, and with some blue-green algae, cyanobacteria, such as Anabaena and nostoc, forming coralloid roots of cycas. Both of these kinds of associations are connected with nitrogen fixation by microscopic organisms present in the roots. 7. Zoochlorophyllae and zooxanthellae. Some unicellular photosynthetic plants, especially algae, known as zoochlorophyllae, live symbiotically in the outer tissues. Hyphae within these trademark_dead organic of certain sponges, colinterrates, mollusks and worms. Cortex cells of the figure 5.1e. Some brown or yellow cells, probably S. flagellates, zooxanthellae, are also present. Algae are photosynthetic and produce oxygen and nitrogenous compounds beneficial to hosts, and in exchange, they obtain materials such as carbon dioxide and nitrogenous wastes released by metabolism of host animals. The unicellular green alga, Chlorella vulgaris, lives within the gastrodermal cells of Hydra. Likewise, alga zoochloral lives in a planarian, Convoluta roscoffensis. 8. Microorganisms and cellulose digestion. Interspecific mutualism is nicely demonstrated by the flagellate protozoan, Trichonympha, an obligate anaerobe in the gut of several species of wood-eating termites where it digests cellulose. Trichonympha also occurs in the alimentary canal of wood-eating roach Cryptoceras. The termite and roach reduce the wood to small fragments, passing them through the alimentary canal to hindgut, where the protozoans digest the cellulose, changing it into sugar. The host benefits the protozoa by removing harmful metabolic waste products and maintaining anaerobic conditions in the intestine. Matter in the soil. 9. Fungus gardens. There exist certain mutualistic associations between insects and fungi. For example, the insect fungus galls of gall insects, e.g., midge, Lasioptera, are lined by a fungus which is parasitic on the host plant. It is believed that the female midge deposits spores of fungus at the time she lays her eggs in the plant or when insect sucks plant sap. Gall fungus seems to assist the insect indirectly by partly breaking down the tissue so that the insect can digest it. Figure 5.3. Besides these, wings dusted upper cortex underscore with Figure 5.1. Positive interspecific interactions. A. Mutalism. A bee feeding on nectar and also is dusted with pollen. B. Mutalism. A part of TS of lichen thallus showing algal and fungal partners. C. Mutalism. A root system of a legume showing nodule. B. TS through the root and nodule. D. Mutalism. Mycorrhizae, i.e., association between root of higher plant and fungal hyphae. A part of mycorrhizal root covered by fungal hyphae. B. A part of mycorrhizal root showing fungal mantle. E. Mutualism. A relationship between the polyp animal and several algae. A cross-section of head of coral polyp showing algal layer. B. A part of CS of coral head magnified. F. Commensalism. Epiphyte orchid growing perched on the branch of another plant. B. TS of aerial root of orchid showing velamen. G. Commensalism. A diagrammatic sketch showing 3 commensals, the small goby, scale worm and pea crab, living in the burrow of the echiriid worm. H. Protocooperation. Association between sea anemone and hermit crab. Gall insects. There are various cases of insect gardeners such as ambrosia beetles, tropical termites and American ants which do gardening of fungi in their nests to get a regular supply of their food directly or indirectly. I1. Commensalism. Commensalism defines the coaction in which 2 or more species are associated and one species at least derives benefit from the association, while the other associates are neither benefited nor harmed. The concept of commensalism has been broadened in recent years to apply to coactions other than those centering on food, cover, support, protection, and locomotion are now frequently included. Bear, 1951, Kende, 1974. Some common examples of commensalism are the following. 1. Lianas. These plants are common in tropical rainforests where light at ground level is scarce because of the dense and multi-storied growth of vegetation. Lianas are vascular, woody plants rooted in the ground but which climb up with the support of other trees and reach almost to the top of the forest canopy. The woody stem of lianas is closely attached to the supporting tree but it is not involved with it in any nutritional relationship. Thus, with much economy of mechanical tissues, lianas are able to get better light. On the basis of the type of device used for climbing their supports, lianas are classified as leaners, thorn lianas, twiners are. Swollen thorn. Figure 5.2. Swollen thorns of Acacia cornigera on a lateral branch. Each thorn is occupied by 20 to 40 immature ants and tend to. Lianas. Tendril lianas. In North Indian tropical deciduous forests, Bauhini hilii thorns on the tree or OC. Oinia bahili is a core, elm copied by one ant colony. Liana. Other common lianas, after Krebs, 1985. Are species of Ficus and Tinospora. 15 workers ants. Alda. 2. Epiphytes. Epiphytes are the plants growing on other plants. Figure 5.1f. They use other plants only as support and not for water or food supply. Epiphytes differ from the lianas in that they are not rooted into the soil. They may grow on trees, shrubs or larger submerged plants. They grow either on the trunks or leaves. Certain common examples of epiphytes are orchids, bromeliads, hanging, mosses, usnea and electoria. Epiphytes are most common in tropical rainforests. They derive their supply of moisture and nutrient from the frequent rains and debris accumulated in bark crevices. Dust is also a source of the nutrients. Roots of epiphytes often store water in a special tissue, called velamen. For meeting water requirements, in the epiphyte Dischidia, the leaves fold to form a jug-like structure having a narrow mouth where water accumulates. Roots of the epiphyte enter and grow in these specialized cavities of leaf. Many epiphytes develop a thick network of roots upon which wind-blown dust accumulates and provides the necessary edaphic environment. 3. Epizoans. Some plants grow on the surfaces of animals. For example, some green algae grow on the long, grooved hair of sloth. Basicladia cladophoracea grows on the backs of freshwater turtle. 4. Epizoite. Likewise, ectocommensals or epizoite animals are associated with another animal for the purpose of anchorage and protection. Many small animals, for example, become attached to the outside of larger ones, such as the protozoans Trichodina and Carona on Hydra, Vorticelids Vorticella, Epistylus or various other aquatic organisms, branchiobdelid annelids on crayfish, the barnacles, which attach themselves to the backs of whales and shells of horse-shore crabs and so on. The remora fishes attach themselves to the bellies of sharks, swordfish, tunny, barracuda, or sea turtle by means of a dorsal fin highly modified into a suction disc on the top of the head. They are of small size and are not burdensome to the host. The host benefits the remora, however, for when the host feeds, the scraps of food floating back are swept up by the remora. 5. Commensals may also be internal. The host benefits Many small animals, for example, become attached to the outside of larger ones, such as the protozoans Trichodina and Carona on Hydra, Vorticelids Vorticella, Epistylus or various other aquatic organisms, branchiobdelid annelids on crayfish, the barnacles, which attach themselves to the backs of whales and shells of horse-shore crabs and so on. The remora fishes attach themselves to the bellies of sharks, swordfish, tunny, barracuda, or sea turtle by means of a dorsal fin highly modified into a suction disc on the top of the head. They are of small size and are not burdensome to the host. The host benefits the remora, however, for when the host feeds, the scraps of food floating back are swept up by the remora. 5. Commensals may also be internal. For example, many harmless protozoans occur in the intestinal tract of mammals, including man. Some microorganisms such as Bacterium Escherichia coli is found in human colon. The pea crab, Pinithers ostrium, lives as a commensal in the mantle O cavity of certain sea mussels. The crab steals food collected by the host mollusk but does little if any other known injury. The hermit crab normally lives inside gastropod shell. The pitcher of the pitcher plant found in bogs furnishes a breeding site or home for certain species of midge flies, mosquitoes, and tree toads. Many kinds of microorganisms, plants and animals, such as small crabs, shrimps, polychaetes, ophiuroids, ascidians, etc. live in the canal system of sponges. L.I. Gall midge. Lasioptera 5. The nest of one species often furnishes shelter and protection for other species as well. Ant nests may contain guest species of various other insects. Some birds place their nests close to wasps, bees or ants for the protection offered by these insects. Woodchuck burrows are used also by rabbits, bee skunks and raccoons, especially in winter. 6. Commensalism-like associations also exist between Figure 5.3. Gall midge, a variety of microorganisms in higher plants. For example, B. Plant galls. The zone of soil around the roots of higher plants characterized by intense microbial activity, called the rhizosphere, the surface proper of the roots growing in soil, the rhizoplane, the boundary layer of air over the green leaves with active microbes, the phyllosphere, and the leaf surface, phylloplane, constitute important ecological niches, where occur rich populations of microorganisms including fungi, actinomycetes and bacteria. The living roots and leaves of higher plants are known to continuously diffuse various metabolic products, mainly sugars and amino acids. These are sources of nutrition for microorganisms present therein. I. Protocooperation. Protocooperation is less extreme sort of interaction than mutualism in which the interaction is clearly beneficial to both species, allowing the equilibrium population levels of both to be higher than they otherwise would be. However, it is not obligatory for either species. Examples of protocooperation are many, including the relationship between water moccasins and large birds such as herons and ibises on several islands off the west coast of Florida. The birds nest in the lower branches of relatively unprotected trees, while the snakes congregate around the bases. This protects the birds from tree-climbing predators such as raccoons. In turn, the snake feed, in part, on fish dropped by the birds and the occasional baby birds that fall out of the nest. Ehrenfeld, 1970. Another good example of protocooperation is of colinterate, sea anemone, Adamsia palliata, attached to the empty molluscan shell harboring hermit crab, Eupagirus pridoxi, figure 5.1h. The sea anemone is carried by the crab to fresh feeding grounds and crab in turn is said to be protected from its enemies by sea anemone. Some ecologists prefer to include this association under commensalism. B. Negative interactions. In case of negative interactions, one or both species are harmed in any way during their life period. Some authors such as Clark, 1954, prefer to call these types of interactions as antagonism. The negative interactions include the following three broad categories. 1. Exploitation. In exploitation, one species harm the other by making its direct or indirect use for support, shelter or food. It is of following types. Social parasitism. Social parasitism describes the exploitation of one species by another, for various advantages. It is a kind of parasitism in which the parasite foists the rearing of its young into the host. Social parasitism in various stages of development is found among some higher vertebrates and insects. For example, there occurs an egg parasitism in two species of birds, Old World cuckoos and the brown-headed cowbirds of North America, both of which do not build nests of their own, rather they deposit their eggs in nests of other species, abandoning eggs and young to the care of foster parents. Similarly, there occurs a brood parasitism in between two Indian birds, Indian coal and crow. The Indian coal, Eudynamys scalopesa, like many of its cuckoo cousins, family Cuculidae, neither incubates its eggs nor feed its young. But these functions are secretly forced upon the house crow Corvus splendens, and jungle crow Corvus macrorhynchus Davis, De, and Pal, 1977. One species of ant attacks foraging workers of another species and snatches away the food they are transporting, or the robber species may deliberately rob another nest for food. Some species of ants make slaves of the workers of other species. Such kind of dependency of one species on another also occurs in other social insects such as termites, wasps and bees. Social insects are apparently the only animals other than man to have succeeded in domesticating other species, and of cultivating plants, particularly fungi, for food. Parasitism. Parasitism is a kind of harmful coaction, disoperation, between two species. It is the relation between two individuals wherein one individual called parasite receives benefit at the expense of other individual called host. Parasitism is mainly a food coaction, but the parasite derives shelter and protection from the host, as well. A parasite usually parasitizes a host which is larger in body size than it. Further, a parasite does not ordinarily kill its host, at least not until the parasite has completed its reproductive cycle. However, a host may die due to some secondary infection or suffer from stunted growth, emaciation, or sterility. The balance between parasite and host is upset if the host produces antibodies or other substances which hamper normal development of the parasite. In general, the parasite derives benefit from the relation while the host suffers harm. But this does not mean that all parasites are harmful. The former category constitutes the pathogenic parasites. Classification of parasites. Parasites exhibit a tremendous diversity in ways and adaptations to exploit their hosts. The parasites may be viral parasites, e.g., bacterial, plant and animal viruses, microbial parasites, e.g., bacteria, protozoa, fungi, etc., phytoparasites, e.g., plant parasites, and zooparasites, e.g., animal parasites such as platyhelminths, nematodes, arthropods, etc. They may parasitize microorganisms, plants and animals. They may occur on the outside of the host, ectoparasites, or live within the body of the host, endoparasites. The endoparasites usually live in the alimentary tract, body cavities, various organs or blood or other tissues of host. Ectoparasites may be parasitic only in the immature stages, the hairworm larva, parasitic in aquatic insects, only the adult parasitic, fleas, on birds and mammals, or both larvae and adults may be parasitic, the blood-sucking lice and flies, biting lice, mites, and ticks that occur on birds, mammals, and sometimes reptiles, and the monogenetic trematodes on fish. Similar relation occurs in endoparasites, but in them usually all the stages of life are parasitic. Entozoic amoebae, trichomonad flagellates, opalinid ciliates, sporozoans, pentastomids, nematodes, digenetic trematodes, acanthocephalons, cestodes, and some copepodes. Further, endoparasites rely on various means of transport from one host to another so that their survival, range of distribution, and life cycle are unaffected. For the endoparasite, the interior of its host is its microhabitat and microenvironment, while the outside environment is the macroenvironment. The host acts as a buffer between the parasite and the outside environment. Changes in the microenvironment directly influence the parasite while alterations in the macroenvironment influence it directly. Thus, mutual adaptations and tolerance between the host and parasite are important factors facilitating successful transmission of endoparasites, and climatic fluctuations tend to alter the physiology of the parasite, host or vector. Mutual adaptations are the parasite's abilities to establish and maintain itself in a favorable location within the host and exist in a proper form for sufficient length of time, enabling subsequent transport to another host and continuation of species. Animals may also be parasitic to plants. Nematodes infest the roots of plants. Wasps or gnats form galls on plants such as oaks, hickories, willows, roses, goldenrods, and asters. Mites stimulate formation of witches' brooms in hackberry. A variety of insects, the larvae of which arrowleaf miners, wood borers, cambium feeders, and fruit eaters should be included here. Lastly, parasites may be full-time or permanent parasites or part-time or temporary parasites. Mosquitoes and bugs that suck the blood of their hosts are temporary parasites. Some temporary parasites spend only a part of their life cycle as parasites. For example, Glaucidium larva of Anodonta, freshwater mussel, attaches itself to the body of the fish by means of its hooks and penetrates inside the fish integument to remain buried there for several weeks and finally emerges out as the young mussel to lead an independent existence. Permanent parasites, however, spend their life completely on other organisms. The common examples of permanent parasites are Plasmodium, Entamoeba histolytica, and other protozoan pathogens, different platyhelminths, nematodes, arthropods, etc. Parasitic adaptations. While studying parasitism as a biotic factor influencing the life and activities of parasites and hosts, we often encounter manifold adaptations, both offensive and defensive, being developed by the host, as well as by the parasite. An endoparasite entering a host often meets with the antibodies or phagocytic cells produced by the host. The ectoparasites and endoparasites have following parasitic adaptations. 1. In parasitic animals, a reduction of organs of special sense of nervous system, and of locomotory organs occur. 2. Most ectoparasites develop some clinging organs such as hooks, suckers, etc., to get attached with the body of their hosts. They also develop special piercing and sucking organs to suck the blood of animals or sap of plants. Certain blood-sucking ectoparasites such as leeches, blood-sucking mosquitoes, etc., contain certain anticoagulant enzymes in their salivary secretions. 3. Most endoparasites exhibit anaerobic respiration, high rate of reproduction, parthenogenesis, hermaphroditism, polyembryony, intermediate host and a complicated life cycle. Loppage, 1951. Some endoparasites, such as tapeworm, have become so adapted to the host that they no longer require a digestive system. They simply absorb their food directly through their body wall. Further, parasites that live within the bodies of plants and animals possess cuticles or develop cysts resistant to the digestive enzymatic action of the host. 4. Many parasites pass their entire existence in a single host, others require 1, 2, even 3 intermediate hosts. It is of ecological significance that both primary and intermediate hosts of a parasite occur in the same habitat or community. Even then, the hazards to successful passage from one host to another are so great and mortality so high that enormous quantities of offspring are produced to ensure that at least a few individuals will complete the cycle. 5. Parasites are transferred from one host to another by active locomotion of the parasite itself, by ingestion, as one animal sucks the blood of or eats another, by ingestion as an animal takes in eggs, spores, or encysted stages of the parasite along with its food or drinking water, as a result of bodily contact between hosts, or by transportation from host by way of vectors. For example, the bacteria that cause tularemia in man are carried from rabbit to rabbit by ticks. Man contacts the disease when he handles infected rabbits, but the incidence of infection is greatly reduced in the autumn when cold weather forces the ticks, i.e., the vectors of bacteria, to leave the rabbits and go into hibernation. Host specificity of parasites. Certain parasites, such as copepods, infect a wide range of hosts and they are ubiquitously present in various invertebrates and fishes. Most parasitic genera, however, are adapted to hosts of one phylum only. For example, each order of birds possesses its own particular species of tapeworms. This is true even when several order of birds live in the same habitats as do. For instance, grebes, loons, herons, ducks, waders, flamingos and cormorants. Bear, 1951. Species of flagellate protozoans that occur in termite alimentary canals are largely host-specific. Some species of gall wasps attack only one species of oak. Where a single species parasitizes 2 or more host species, the shape and structure of the gall formed around the egg and larva on both hosts is essentially similar. When several insects are found on the same oak, each kind of parasite produces its own characteristic gall form. The parasite-specific gall formation is found to be related with parasite-specific enzyme, Kinsey, 1930. Effects of parasite on the host. Disease. Parasites may not cause immediate mortality, but they cause damage to body structures. Should it become excessive, may cause death. Because of these parasitically caused anatomical damages, the finely adjusted balance of different vital processes of host's body become disturbed and host is said to be diseased. There are a number of causes of diseases. Parasites are 1. Physiological stress, nutritional deficiency and poisoning are others. Some of the common parasitic agents of disease and consequent mortality of animals are following. 1. Viruses are the potent agents of several disastrous diseases of plants and animals including man. For instance, some viruses are the agents of hoof and mouth disease in deer, spotted fever in rabbit, encephalitis and distemper in foxes. 2. Bacteria may produce localized inflammatory changes in tissue, enter the bloodstream, or produce powerful poisons known as toxins. They cause a variety of diseases, notably tularemia, paratyphoid, and tuberculosis among birds and mammals, as well as other diseases in lower types of organisms. 3. Fungus spores of Aspergillus may be drawn into the lungs of ground-feeding birds, where they germinate and grow, causing aspergillosis disease. Fungus may also develop on the external surface of animals. 4. Protozoan parasites are especially important in the alimentary tract and in the blood. A sporozoan species of Eimeria damages the walls of the intestine in upland game birds and causes coccidiosis disease. Toxoplasma becomes encysted in the brain of rodents. Leukocytozoon is a common blood parasite of waterfowl and game birds. 5. Worm parasites, such as tapeworms, nematodes, and acanthocephalans may wander through the host's body doing mechanical injury as well as destroying and consuming tissues. The host may respond by forming a fibrous capsule or cyst around an embedded parasite. 6. External parasites such as ticks, fleas, lice, mites, and flies do not commonly produce serious mortality by themselves, but they are often vectors, transmitting protozoa, bacteria and viruses from one animal to another. Heavy infestations of external parasites however lower the vitality of an animal and cause diseases of fur or feathers. 7. Nutritional deficiency in vitamins or minerals, or improper balance among carbohydrates, proteins, and fats may produce malformations, lack of vigor, or even death. 8. Food poisoning, botulism, occurs when certain food become contaminated with the toxins released by the bacterium Clostridium botulinum. 9. Physiological stress, CELI, 1955, is a term that has come to be applied to changes produced in the body non-specifically by many different agencies which may accompany any disease. Effects of stress include loss of appetite and vigor, ache and pains, and loss of weight. Internally, physiological stress causes following abnormalities, such as acute degeneration of the lymphatic organs, decrease of the blood eosinophils, enlargement and increased secretory activity of the adrenal cortex, and a variety of changes in the chemical constitution of the blood and tissues. Parasitism in the plants. There are some parasitic vascular plants. Species of Cuscuta dadar, which are total stem parasites, grow on other plants on which they depend for nourishment. Young stem twines around the host stem, figure 5.4, and it develops adventitious roots which finally penetrate the stem of host, establishing relationship with its conducting elements. The specialized roots are called haustoria. Other examples of such association are total root parasites as Orobanche, Conophalis, Epiphagus, Balanophora and Striga which are found on roots. Rafflesia. Of higher plants. Orobanche effects. The yield of mustard and brinjolin is parasitic to the roots of Solanaceae, Cruciferae and Gramineae. Rafflesia. Is root parasite of vitis. Partial root. Parasites belong to family Loranthacea viscum album. Loranthus sp. They grow rooted in branches of host tree. Examples of partial root parasites include Santalum album and Thesium. Fungi, bacteria, mycoplasmas, rickettsias and viruses are other common. Striga. Examples of plant parasites. Thus, fungi such as rusts and smuts are parasitic to many crop plants and reduce their production. Parasitism may occur within the species. For example, in higher plants the growing pollen tube may be considered as a male plant parasitic on the tissues of the stigma and style of the flower female plant. Parasitotism. Some Diptera and Hymenoptera deposit their eggs in the immature stages of other insects. The larvae on hatching feed on the host until they are fully grown. In such type of parasitism in which host generally dies of the larval destruction before the larva emerges and the parasitoid larva generally lives in spite of the host's death, is called parasitotism. It stands in between parasitism and predation. The parasitoid may in turn be infested with hyperparasitoids. In the Chicago, Samia cecropia, a Saturniid moth, suffers the destruction of nearly 23% of its Cocumbi anachpneumonid parasitoid, Spilocryptus extrematus, which deposits an average of 33 eggs on the inside of each cocoon or on the surface of larva. The host larva dies in a few hours after the parasitoid hatches and the ichpneumonid larva moves about freely, feeding on the cuticle and burrowing into the tissues to drink the body fluids. S. extrematus ice infested by another hyperparasitoid, Anaplex smithi, which causes about Haustorium host root. Propagation. Rats selectively remove seeds from grasses and store them in their burrow in large quantities. Fruit-eating birds and animals have some advantageous effects also. Some seeds fail to germinate unless they have passed through the gut of birds or other animals. The seed coat in these seeds are hard and impermeable to water or oxygen. The seed coat is softened and often digested by the animals and the rest of the seeds come out and germinate quickly. Further, in the outskirts of Indian forests, villagers tend to scrape grasses to feed their cattle in summer. Scraping is usually done right at the ground level. Completely exposed and loosened topsoil is blown by strong summer wind. This is followed by rainy season, during which initial heavy showers result in great soil erosion. But the coevolution of species within natural ecosystems has in fact led to a dynamic balance between the populations in a community, so that the population sizes of predator and prey species are interregulated by feedback mechanisms that effectively control the population of both. B. Predation in plants. Plants provide the following examples of their predation. 1. Carnivorous fungi. Propagation. Rats selectively remove seeds from grasses and store them in their burrow in large quantities. Fruit-eating birds and animals have some advantageous effects also. Some seeds fail to germinate unless they have passed through the gut of birds or other animals. The seed coat in these seeds are hard and impermeable to water or oxygen. The seed coat is softened and often digested by the animals and the rest of the seeds come out and germinate quickly. Further, in the outskirts of Indian forests, villagers tend to scrape grasses to feed their cattle in summer. Scraping is usually done right at the ground level. Completely exposed and loosened topsoil is blown by strong summer wind. This is followed by rainy season, during which initial heavy showers result in great soil erosion. 2. Amensalism. Amensalism is a comprehensive term in biotic interactions to denote the adverse or depressing effect of one of the competing population or species while the other remains stable. Thus, amensalism is a situation in which one population definitely inhibits the other while remaining unaffected itself. By so modifying the environment, the organism improves its own chance of survival. Amensalism, which commonly involves some type of chemical interaction, by which the organisms of one species affects the well-being and growth of individuals or the population biology of other, is called allochemic. See Whitaker, 1970, Smith, 1974, Kende, 1974. The inhibitor substance may be inorganic chemicals such as acids or bases which are produced by pioneering organisms, inhibitor species, and which reduce the competition for nutrients, light, and space, between the amensal species and inhibitor species. The production of relatively simple organic toxins is another source of chemical inhibitors. These toxins inhibit seedling growth in the vicinity. This may affect succession of plant species, especially important in the early stages. Muller, 1966. A third type of inhibitor chemical is the antibiotic, a potent antimicrobial agent. It is a substance produced by an organism, which, in low concentrations, can inhibit or kill the growth of another organism. The majority of inhibiting chemicals are produced as secondary substances by plants and released into the soil through the roots or leaf wash. The suppression of growth through theralies of chemicals by a higher plant is known as allelopathy. Thus, allelopathy allelin equals each other plus pathy equals suffering, means chemical control of distribution among plants. For example, walnut tree produces a non-toxic substance, juglone Bode, 1958, which is found in its leaves, fruits and other tissues. When the leaves or fruits fall on the ground, juglone is released to soil, where it is oxidized to a substance that inhibits the growth of certain understory species and garden plants such as heaths and broadleaf herbs, and favors others such as bluegrass and blackberries. In Southern California, Salvia leucophila leaves emit some volatile oils which reach the soil surface and inhibit the germination of seeds of other species and the inhibitory effects persist for several months. Muller, 1966. Similar allelopathic effects are also reported to be exerted by Adenostoma fasciculatum, Christensen and Muller, 1975. Data and Chakrabarti, 1982, prepared weed plant extracts such as of Croton bonplandianum and Clerodendrum viscosum in water and tested their effects under different dilutions on seed germination and growth of crops as pea, mustard, rice and lettuce. C. Bonplandianum inhibits germination of seeds of above crops except of P at high concentration. They found that the active ingredient in C. bonplandianum leaves showing allelopathic potential are abscisic and phasic acids, while in C. viscosum inhibiting mustard seed germination may be a terpene. Clerodendrum is also reported to exert allelopathic potential on several weeds such as Abutylin indicum, Amaranthus spinosus, Cassia tora, etc. C. ambushed, 1990. Salvia leucophila. Agriculturists have recognized the action of smother crops as weed suppressors. The smother crops include barley, rye, sorghum, millet, sweet clover, alfalfa, soybeans and sunflowers. Their inhibition of weed growth was assumed to be due to competition for water, light or nutrients. However, 13% destruction of S. extrematis cocoons. A chalcidiid, Debrachys bouchinus, feed both upon S.